And hello, everyone. I am very excited to be here this afternoon. I hope you're all very well. Hope you're able to hear me okay. Let me get a quick confirmation from chat that you're hearing me just fine. And I'm here with Kim from our development team.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hopefully you're hearing Kim as well. No audio issues, we hope. Really great to see everyone. Thank you so much for dropping by to spend some of your afternoon with us. We have been hard at work. We've been doing a lot. It's been a pretty wild start to 2023, I'd say. There's been a lot going on. I hope that everyone here is excited to delve into some wholesome TTRPG content that is not about licensing. I know that's been on everybody's mind, but hopefully we're all ready for a bit of refreshment and focus on some exciting gameplay and stuff that we can bring. So we're not really going to talk much about licensing at all today. I know that is a topic on everyone's mind, but the situation is unfolding, and we are paying close attention, and we'll make statements when the time is right to further communicate with you all. So hopefully you'll understand that that's not the topic of today's stream. In fact, hopefully you'll be grateful that that's not the topic of today's stream, because we're here to talk about some really cool stuff that we are doing in Foundry VTT version 11, which is something we've been working on for, I guess, probably about 2 months now, although a lot of that time has gone away to the holidays and time off and stuff like that. Where we are overall in version 11 is that we are on the precipice of releasing prototype 1. So for those of you who know a little bit about our release schedule and cadence, we start with a prototype phase, which is where we are adding new features and investing in our infrastructure and making some of the more meaningful changes that we need to do to really move the software forward. So there's going to be probably definitely two, probably only two, but we'll see, prototype releases that we'll make for version 11, and then we'll get on to what we call the development testing phase, where we want all of our API developers, module and system devs to really kind of really try out all the new features. We invite our most hardcore testers to try out the prototype, because it's really helpful for us to get that early feedback. But in the prototype phase, it's in a place where it's really not intended for anyone who's not just trying to help us improve the software. Any goal other than trying to help us improve the software is really sort of off the table at this point. But we are grateful to those of you who are willing to spend a little bit of time using the prototype to help us collect feedback and to help us make version 11 as functional and as stable and as high performance and all those wonderful things as we can. So anyways, prototype 1 is expected to go out today. Please do not rush off to use it. I'm going to show you some cool things today, and so the temptation will be to go play. Just know that if you do that, you need to be very careful. You need to do it in a separate installation. You need to use a separate user data structure. Don't use prototype 1 without very cautiously backing up your data. You can't go back from V11 back to V10. That's not a direction you can go. So anyways, know all of those things. And while I do hope you're all going to be excited to see what I've got to show today, it's not going to be to a point where it's ready for people to use in stable games until a couple months from now. We'll finish the prototype phase, we'll go into the next phases of testing, and then we'll get to the point where V11 is stable. And that's kind of an overview of the whole process. But down to business in terms of the prototype that we have to show, we've been working hard on some really important features. The focus of V11 is has a couple of different areas. So every time we tackle a new generation of the software, we allow our community on Patreon to vote. In fact, I'll pull up the Patreon vote here. This was a particularly tightly contested vote this time around. The version 11 feature vote, of the Patreon supporters who weighed in, 31% to 30%, the winner was just very narrowly compendium improvements. And we have a lot intended and planned for compendium improvements that's going to allow compendium packs to be better organized, both in the sidebar as well as within those compendium packs in terms of like internal folder structure and things like that. Those features, compendium improvements, as something that we have scoped for prototype 2. So those features are not done yet. Those will be we'll be showcasing those in the next dev stream when we show you prototype 2. Some of the other features that we have prioritized for V11, some of the big stuff is an improvement to our database technology that's done in prototype 1. Improvements to the performance of Fog of War, that's done, that's in prototype 1. An exciting new walling and lighting feature that I'm really excited to show you, that's done, that's in prototype 1. And some really fun toys for our developers to take advantage of in terms of the ability for modules as well as systems to define custom types for documents like actors, items, journal entry pages. This is a really powerful new feature that is going to really empower the module development ecosystem even further to have custom module-specific data structures for particular types of documents. So that's really something that's very exciting. That's kind of like the high-level areas of focus that we're tackling in V11. The things that we've accomplished specifically in prototype 1, kind of the major highlights is the database rework, which I'm going to comment on at some length, those document types that I just mentioned, some improvements to what packages can do in terms of data storage or defining relationships, some very significant performance improvements for Fog of War, and some new walling features that are pretty exciting. So let's go ahead and dive in, and I'm just going to enjoy chatting with Kim and chatting with y'all in chat to answer questions, to really showcase what we're doing with some things. So if you have a question in chat, what I'll ask you to do throughout the broadcast today is to hopefully preface that question with an all caps question, here's my question. That'll just make it easier for me to visually pick it out in the chat log so I can answer the questions that you have. And in between answering questions, we're just going to charge through the V11 Prototype 1 patch notes that they're not shared yet, but like I said, those will be out hopefully later today. The team is still doing some final rounds of testing to make sure that everything looks good. As long as we're internally happy, then that will go out later today. Question from Magpie Rook, why is the Foundry team so cool? Shout out to Ali, our newest team member. Ali has joined the team as a backend developer and is already fast at work doing some awesome changes on our website and with some of our web architecture. So yeah, how are you doing, Strixon? Making bomb-ass tokens and maps, as always, I'm sure. So let's go ahead and jump into architecture improvements. I want to highlight at first just a couple of notes. This is going to be a little bit more for the devs in the audience. We have some dependency and package updates in V11. So Electron is upgraded to 22, which brings some new features. It was Electron 20 in V10. We also are increasing our required Node.js version to run Foundry to Node 16 or higher. So V10 supported Node 14, but for those of you who are running a dedicated server and you're running Node 14, you're going to have to upgrade to Node 16 to move forward with V11. So those are some just right off the bat, just little notes for people. Let's jump into database stuff. Kim, I know I maybe tackled a little bit more of this one, but I wanna pull you in here. Do you want to share a little bit of perspective on the prior state of our database technology? Like what worked well about it? What were some of the challenges that we faced? What were some of the friction points that we had?
Yeah, sure. I suppose the biggest motivation for switching was that our old database that we were using, NetDB, for anyone who doesn't know, was no longer maintained. It wasn't an issue for our use case, but there are some annoying critical vulnerabilities that we get spammed with every time we do an npm install. And we decided to try to move to something which was a little bit more stable, a little bit better maintained. But to cause as little disruption as possible, we had some very, very important principles for the new database technology, and the big one was that it has to be storable as a single file or folder in this case in a portable way, so that your Foundry installation can still be portable and decentralized, and we've managed to really get the best of everything. I think we've got a good stable maintained package. It's faster than NetDB. It's still stored as a folder, a single folder that you can copy and paste between your worlds, though actually you probably shouldn't do that, but you can for like backup purposes, for example. That's a good reason to do it. But
yeah, so what we're moving towards in yeah, sorry about the echo. I'm trying to adjust the position of my mic so that it doesn't pick up that. Sorry about that. One of the things that we're doing with this change from NetDB, as Kim says, or NEDB if you prefer, or however you want to say it, we're moving towards a technology called LevelDB. It's a well-proven and stable technology that is embeddable, that suits our requirements for an Electron embeddable database. It's fundamentally a key value store, which is a little bit different than NEDB, but it works in similar ways, and it allows us to do many of the same things. Kim is correct to mention that, like, what happens when you move to the new database is that your existing data becomes migrated. So I'm gonna just pull up my Windows Explorer here, and I'll just pull up a world that's running. And what we're doing in the prototype phase is that, so here's a world in my Windows Explorer. Here are all the old NEDB files that existed prior to running this on V11. And then here, these folders, these are the new LevelDB databases that exist once you load your world in V11. So for the time being, during the prototype phase, both exist side by side. Like, we have both the old databases and the new databases. By the time V11 gets to stable, that's not going to happen. It's just going to be straight in with the new. But for ease of testing during the prototype phase, this allows you to repeat that migration or debug things that might have happened or things like that. So anyways, that's a quick overview. What you should expect is that anytime you load a database in V11 that was in NEDB format, it's going to be automatically converted at the time that it's loaded. So modules, systems that are providing compendium packs, they don't need to do anything to work in V11. all those compendium packs that are provided are just going to automatically transfer over to the new database specification. And then once that one-time migration has happened, all of these updates, updates happening in the world, anything that you're doing with your scenes or documents or chat or anything, that's all happening on the new database engine. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the advantages and features that new DB engine gets us, but I want to maybe tackle a couple questions from chat real quick. Do we need an audio guy on the team? Maybe we do. Matt on our team has much better production quality for Twitch streams than I do. This is just me doing a little off-the-cuff stream here today. My Twitch broadcasting skills are not as polished. Question from Whitespine: are there any new features that the new DB might allow? I'm glad you asked, Whitespine. There are some important new features. So one of the fundamental features of LevelDB is that it has a concept of levels, has a concept of sub-levels, in fact. So you can define a sort of hierarchical partitioning structure to your database that allows you to store. It's a key value store, like I said, so you can store records in those sub-levels using an organizational scheme that makes the most sense to you. That was really powerful for us, and it's one of the most exciting features about this particular technology compared to other options that we had. As many of you may know, we have in Foundry, we have documents like actors and items and journal entries, and then we have embedded documents within those documents, like pages within a journal entry, or active effects inside an actor, or tokens inside a scene. A limitation of the prior DB technology was that whenever you make an update to any of those things, you have to update the entire parent actor. So when you change an item that's in an actor or an active effect, you have to update the whole actor. Or when you move a token in a scene, you have to update the whole scene. That includes a lot of data that isn't actually changing, like the walls aren't changing when you move a token, but nonetheless, in the old technology, we had to rewrite the whole scene document to the database when an embedded document in that scene changes. Now with this system of sublevels, we can individually address pieces of data. Those records, those embedded documents become individually addressable via database operations. So we can create, update, delete embedded documents without needing to touch any of the other embedded documents or the parent document, although we do touch the parent document to record some metadata. But anyways, it means that the amount of data that we're writing to disk is much less for typical transactions with LevelDB than it was before. And that translates to some performance improvements. So we're measuring kind of between 10 to sometimes as much as 20% speed up for database operations using this new technology, which is a really significant improvement. Now these operations are super fast, like a couple milliseconds, and so you're speeding up from like 5 milliseconds to 4 milliseconds, and does that matter? Well, you may have different opinions, but it is faster, and faster is better. So we're happy with the performance improvements that we get from database I/O in that regard. Another really interesting feature of this set of sublevels is that it allows us to provide more structure to the type of data that we're storing inside a single database. This is going to be particularly valuable when we take on the compendium improvements in part 2, in prototype 2, where we know we want to add folder structure within compendium packs. Currently, a compendium pack has all this stuff in it, but it's not organized by folder, because in the AnyDB world, a single database file could only contain like records of the same data schema. In this new world, we can have sibling sublevels of our database file. So we can have a sublevel for these are the actors. We can have a sublevel for these are the folders. And both the actors and the folders can belong to the compendium pack. So we'll be able to have multiple document types within the same database file. That doesn't mean that you're going to be able to you as the end user are going to be able to do whatever you want to. There are going to be limitations. I think for compendium packs, we are still going to say each compendium pack, like this is a compendium of actors, this is a compendium of items, but those compendium packs will be able to have folders as well. And so that's one of the key improvements that this DB technology unlocks for us. Lastly, but certainly not least, and we haven't accomplished this yet, but we're very hopeful that we will, we believe this new database technology is going to allow us to really sort of solve the pain that we feel on a repeated basis due to unlinked tokens. As some of you who are more dedicated Foundry developers may know, unlinked tokens have always been a sort of pain point, and we've done a lot of work to kind of make them better and less painful, but no matter what we do, there has always been some sort of friction, and that's because of the way that we have to write all of the data into the scene as a single thing. So our ability to maintain the actor data overrides of unlinked tokens as like a sibling sublevel within the scene, it is going to make us have a different set of tools that we can use to solve the problem of unlinked tokens. Now, we expect those changes to be transparent to developers. No changes expected to the client-facing APIs, but under the hood, the reliability of working with unlinked tokens should be improved, and we should be able to eliminate a lot of tech debt that we have in that particular area. Okay, question time. Is there any plan to make compendium sharing, exporting user-friendly for normal DMs? Possible. I think one of the things we'd like to support is making it easier for someone to set up a compendium of content that's shared across multiple worlds. That currently requires creating like a little module that you can use that module in both worlds as a way to have a shared compendium. That's a good workflow. I think that makes sense that a module would serve that purpose, but the process of creating that is not very user-friendly, as you correctly point out. And so that is something that we would like to make more user-friendly for, as you say, normal DMs. Absolutely. I don't have any guarantees on that yet, but that's something that we've been talking about and something we want to do as part of V11 if we can. Question from Nocturnal: should the database change be transparent to system developers? Yes, absolutely. All of the database interaction APIs continue to work the same. There is one and really only one exception. That one and only one exception is there is an API for compendium packs to query documents from the compendium using a domain-specific query language that was specific to AnyDB. So there's certain query operators like a logical like $in or $or, a certain syntax of composing those advanced queries that was specific to the AnyDB technology and is not something that the LevelDB technology supports. We have built a query layer on top of LevelDB, so you can still query for documents using what I'd refer to as sort of basic queries, but some of the more powerful query syntax that AnyDB supported is something that we've had to sacrifice along the way. We did an audit of some game systems, and we found a very small number, 3 game systems that we identified as using this, and we have a thread open with those system authors. If any of you in chat feel that this also applies to you, if you're doing those sorts of complex queries using the compendium pack get documents method, feel free to reach out on Discord and we can add you to that thread. Other than that one specific instance, which we feel is pretty low blast radius, small blast radius, everything else is fully transparent. There's no change required. Anything to add to that, Kim? Is there anything I forgot?
Yeah, where systems provide their own packs, for example, you won't need to change anything, at least initially. What will happen is when the user loads your system, their packs that are provided by the system will be automatically migrated. So on their disk, they'll have these LevelDB databases. If you want to move entirely to V11 and remove support for older versions of Foundry in your system, you could pre-migrate those packs to LevelDB and ship those with your system. But like I said, it will remove support for earlier versions.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily something that we recommend right now.
There's a good question from QAW71 about during the creation of modules, sometimes need to like make changes, search and replace in the database. So this is not possible with the standard level DB storage format. This data is stored compressed as binary. So one of the changes is that these database files don't have that human readability that the NEDB files did. What we're doing to compensate for that is we're planning to provide a set of tooling that can be used to sort of pack and unpack a compendium to component JSON files. So you could, for example, I think what we envision this being is you'd be able to kind of extract the source data from one of the compendium packs, and it will create a folder with JSON documents, one per document in the compendium. And those JSON documents are human readable. You can like find, replace, you can make edits to them, and then we'll have a tool that can repack that folder back into the compendium. So basically you can kind of unpack it for editing or for version control. So you get things like nice diffs in your Git repo. You can see like in the diff what was changed about a certain document. And then as build tooling, you can take that folder of all those JSONs and build it to the NEDB file for distribution. So that's kind of the path that we envision using to support that type of workflow. Question from Benios. I hope you're doing well, sir. Does the data string of an actor, journal, etc. within the DB changes? Yes and no. So what doesn't change is any aspect of the data schema, like the data that's stored, the model's still the same. You're still storing the document data to the database. But as I mentioned, because it's binary, it's not human readable. So like the DB files look different. It's not just a readable document in that way. But yeah. Question, how many versions will that auto migration be present? We're not putting a cap on that, Awake. I think we're probably going to keep that NEDB forward migration into LevelDB for quite a while. We haven't committed to a number yet in terms of like what version we might stop doing that, but I think it will be a longer period than maybe our typical. Like usually when we deprecate something, we say like 2 major generations and then we'll get rid of it. This will be longer than that, I think. Al Winks asks features of LevelDB that helped us choose it over other portable formats like SQLite. We're fans of SQLite. Kim's a fan of SQLite. What were some of the findings you had, Kim?
Yeah, I did quite a lot of work when we were investigating this. SQLite was actually a very, very good choice. It fit a lot of our criteria. Like it was a single file, for example. It can do the same thing as Level, where you can have sort of sibling tables in a single file. So you could have an act table and a folder table and an items table in a single file. But its performance was not as good. It really struggled on Rust disks versus LevelDB. Also, SQLite doesn't natively. I won't say natively. There are extensions that allow it to work with JSON data, but it is at its heart a relational database and not like a document database. So there was a little bit of friction there, and it's possible that was like the root cause of these performance issues. But yeah, we did a lot of work with SQLite, used the special JSON extensions, and it works. It's viable, but the performance was too slow on HDDs.
Yeah. I'm gonna scroll my chat back up to current because we've fallen way behind in answering some of these questions. And so for those of you whose questions I'm skipping over, I do apologize. Please feel free to re-ask them if we didn't touch on them. There is one very common question that like a million people have asked, which has to do with empowering APIs for sort of grandchild level editing of documents. So like active effects inside items, inside actors, or items, inside actors. This is a very popular request. That request was basically a non-starter using our prior database technology. This change to LevelDB does not immediately enable that, but it conceptually enables that, I would say. The ability for us to define multiple layers of sublevel hierarchy mean that we could have a sublevel of active effects inside items, inside actors. Now, it's not trivial to just, it's not a switch we can just turn on. It would require some significant development work for our document modification APIs to work for that. But instead of it being a non-starter where the answer you're going to get from us is just, no, we're not going to do that, I think with this technology in place, the answer to that question changes to, we see the value of that, and it's something that once we've proven out the basics of this DB technology a little bit further, and once it's working stably, I think there is opportunity for us to take that on in the future now. Okay, I'm skipping forward. I apologize to everybody whose questions I am just passing right over. Saleha asks, regarding the CLI tooling for packing, unpacking, would it be possible and allowed to use that without a Foundry instance in a CI pipeline? I don't know about without a Foundry instance. We'll have to think about that. I understand the use case there, that you don't need a full Foundry instance just for your CI build pipeline. So maybe that's something we can think about. Certainly, like the tooling, our method of distributing that tooling will be, it will accompany the app, but we might be able to provide sort of the CLI without the app. I don't know. We'll have to think about that. I see what you're asking. I don't have an answer for you on that one yet. Okay. All right. Let's move on. So we've talked about database stuff for a lot. That's pretty in the dirty details of how Foundry works. Let's move to something that we can talk about that's a little bit more like fun and user facing, and we can alternate some of the technical stuff with some of the non-technical stuff. I want to talk about a sort of shiny feature that is fun for DMs and players. So I want to talk about Windows, not the operating system, but in the context of top-down VTT maps. I'm going to go to the infamous forest cabin that I always seem to find myself using for these streams. I guess it's just a handy little demo map. Okay, I want to talk for a minute about what is frequently done today in terms of like windows in buildings. What a lot of you do, and I won't judge you for this, but I don't like it, and I'll explain why. What a lot of you do when you want to have a window is you take your walls and we'll put an invisible wall over this window. And I don't blame you for doing this because it's a window, so it does make sense, and you want to be able to see through it maybe, but and invisible walls are the best tool available for the task, at least in V10. What is it that I don't like about Windows? And maybe some of you also don't like this. Hopefully I'm not the only one. When the observer is very far away from the window, say all the way over here in the woods, and this is maybe worse on even bigger maps, you can just sort of see through the window all the way into the building, and you see everything that's going on from a really long way away. Maybe this map isn't the best one for demonstrating like why that's a problem, but certainly on some maps that are large where you're very far away from a building and hundreds of feet away you look through a window and you see exactly what's going on inside. It's not a great experience. It does not it doesn't preserve the mystery of information reveal in the right way. A second thing I don't love about Windows is the opposite, is that when you're inside the building and the action is all happening on the inside of the building and you have windows everywhere. Here I only have one, but if you had many windows, it can be very distracting because your vision polygons, it's just so many wedges of vision polygon that is, branching out from the building. It takes the focus away from the scene that's happening here inside the room. I'm facing up against this cultist. I'm not looking out the window at what's happening down here. The fact that I get this giant wedge of vision from a window that I'm not even looking through is, to me, something I don't like. So anyways, long story short, in my own games, I've been pretty stubborn about just walling over windows. And if you want to know what's through the window, you ask me, and I, as the DM, will tell you what's through the window. Because I think it spoils too much to be able to see in that way. So I wanted to do something better, and so I was spending some time thinking about what would be a good experience to have with Windows, and lo and behold, Kwok from our user community, who's a very talented developer who's contributed a few things to Foundry, shows up and he's like, I've got an idea for Windows. It was not something that we'd really spoken about, but it just so happened that we both were really thinking about this topic. And so we compared notes, and we brought some of my ideas together with some of Kwok's ideas, and we've come up with a certain feature which I'm very pleased with, and I think it's a great solution to this problem. So let me show you how it works. On the walls layer, which now has a better icon that looks more like a wall, by the way, thank you some of you for noticing, there is a new tool that can make it easy and convenient to create windows. It's right here below secret doors. It's for Windows. I'm gonna make one here, and I'm gonna show you how it works. With this window in place, now when I'm in the same situation, I'm not looking out the window because I'm not next to the window. I'm here in the room, focused on my confrontation with this cultist who's trying to stab me. I'm not looking out the window to what's outside in the forest. But if I move over to the window, then I can start seeing out the window. First a little bit when I'm far away, and then more when I get close. And so as I'll just sort of show you how this adjusts. As I'm moving closer to the window, I get more view outside when I'm right up next to the window than when I'm all the way over here far away from it. And this is configurable. So as you know, any wall can be configured. So when I double click the wall to configure its attributes, there's a new restriction mode for light, sight, or sound called proximity. It's not specifically about Windows because there's other use cases for this feature that also are really good. And so we didn't want to make it specifically about Windows, but Windows are a perfect example of how to use this proximity wall. What proximity does is basically the wall is impenetrable unless you're within a certain proximity of it, in which case you can then see through it. So I have the proximity here set to 10 feet, which means that once I'm within 10 feet of the window, I'll be able to start seeing through the window. But I could change this to be 15 feet, and now I'll be able to see through the window a little bit from further away. So now I don't have to be as close to the window before I can start seeing out of it. The other thing that you can do is you notice that I disabled this feature called proximity threshold attenuation. It's kind of a complicated term. It's got a tooltip that explains it. The tooltip is also kind of complicated. We need to workshop the best and simplest way to explain this concept to the user. It is kind of a nuanced concept though. Basically what it means is that with this off, proximity is a on-off switch, okay? It's either you can see through the window or you can't. So you see I'm moving from 15 feet away to 10 feet away, and it's on, off. Now it's on, now it's off. If I turn on attenuation, Then the amount that I see through the window is relative to how close I am to the window. So now with attenuation on, I move inside the threshold and I can only see a tiny bit. I move more, I can see more. I move more, I can see more. So with attenuation on, how much you can see out the window is a function of how close you are to it. So if I turn on drag token vision, it's maybe an easier way to see this, because then I can kind of show you this in continuous scale. As I move the token around, you see how the vision that I get out the window adjusts as I'm closer to the window. So it's a pretty fancy feature, and it's smooth, and I think I'm really proud of it, because I think it helps to keep the right sort of focus on gameplay, where if you're near a window, you can take advantage of the information of what's outside the window. But if you're not near a window, those windows are no longer like distractions that are either giving you information that you probably shouldn't have, or they're just kind of distracting your vision away from the scene that's at hand. So what I want to do is show one or two other things about this. I'm going to take a moment and make a couple of windows, just so that there's not only one. In the meantime, Kim, you can keep chat entertained or answer some questions or something.
Yep, I've got the list of questions. So right at the top we had, I see 2 guitars on stream. When should we expect the dev team jam stream?
You know about that, I had for a couple years, I wouldn't say that I didn't play, but I just haven't been playing as much, because as you can imagine, life is busy, work and business. And as some of you know, I'm a father. As of about a year ago, I have a son. He's 1. He's wonderful. And I will say that one of the things that's been great about the little guy getting older is that he's really interested in the guitars. And so I've been playing a lot more lately, just because it kind of entertains him. And so that's been kind of nice to reconnect with that side of my hobby.
I don't know who else we have on the team who can play. I'm pretty sure I've seen guitars in Matt's background when he's on our staff meetings. I'm sure Nath has a really good death metal growl.
I don't know how many people on the team are really eager to find out who's actually like really wickedly good at guitar and who just plays a little bit. It's kind of like moment of truth.
Yeah. All right, I'm still getting questions coming in.
Well, let me show something that I really like about these windows. I've added more to the house now. I've filled out all the windows. One of the things that I think is really cool about this is, so here's an example where like I'm in a position where I can like see a little bit through both windows, but I got to get closer to one to really take advantage of it. I like, for example, like when I'm inside the room here and I'm looking over at this other room, I really like that I'm not like seeing through this other window and seeing into this other room, like through 2 windows. Like it's just a nice way that the thresholding works out to like, I can have a window in this room and I can see that there's a wall here and I can see there's a window into this other room, but I'm not now learning that there's this cultist sitting in the middle of this room the same way as I would if this was an invisible wall. Like when the GM's setting up this scene and you're putting invisible walls here, you probably don't expect someone in this room to realize that there's a bad guy sitting in here. And that's the kind of thing that just gets sort of spoiled and given away if you don't have a little bit more tight control over the information. Kim, did you find another question?
I've got loads. I've been noting them down this time, a bit more prepared. Yeah. Do you have any ideas on ongoing monetization ideas to support Foundry? Just worried that the one-time lifetime purchase could bite you in the long term. Not that I'm complaining as a lifetime purchaser. I love the product. Um, so I also wanted to stick around. This was from TLFJ200. This is something that we've had in our Reddit AMAs as well, and it's really nice that people are worried because they want their virtual tabletop to stick around and keep getting developed. Um, so
Yeah, I
yeah,
can
really
speak to that a
appreciate the
little bit.
sentiment there.
I don't want to maybe give out any sort of like announcements in this stream, but there are some things that we're working on. I think the good news that I would share with everyone is that it's not things that we're working on because we urgently need to solve that problem. It's things that we're working on because we do realize that, there is some importance of thinking long term about the business model. We're in really good shape, and I think there's not really a concern that we need to kind of quickly scramble to generate revenue in different ways. But there are some things that we are working on. Yes, we are in the stages of diversifying our portfolio, so to speak, a little bit. Hopefully that puts some minds at ease a little bit without me really being able to talk about details at this time. Here's another nice example
Breaking.
of a window real quick. Obviously, this is sort of like more like a fortification, like an arrow slit kind of thing. So I know I'm just kind of flying above the clouds here, but nice to not sort of see in through the arrow slits, like see in through the fortification when you're outside the fortress, whereas when you're, inside the fortress, you have that vantage point of seeing out and seeing, who's approaching. And so, really that can be a really useful way to use this feature, among a few others that I can also show. Let me find an appropriate scene for the other example that I want to give of how this can be nice. In the meantime, Kim, feel free to keep pulling questions.
Oh, yeah. Any breaking changes on walls or any V10 JSON would load just fine. Pretty sure no breaking changes on walls.
No breaking changes, no. The everything with the thresholds and the attenuation and this Windows feature, it's all additional fields. It's all additional attributes that can be a set in addition to the current schema. So all of the current walls can work just as they have. This is just sort of on top of that.
No 66. I know this guy. He's a GURPS, or they're a GURPS developer. As a module and system creator, what are the breaking changes planned? V9 to V10 was the most painful upgrade yet. Yeah, fair enough. Not a lot of breaking changes planned. The breaking changes should be a bare minimum in V11, and we would encourage system devs to get the prototype and try their system out in it. And if there are errors and issues, bring them to us, and hopefully in a lot of cases we can actually make changes to Core Foundry that would mean that your system does not have to do anything. That's the ideal. So don't rush to work around issues you find in prototype 1, because that'll create a separate issue where you might be working around a bug that we're going to fix, and then you have to make changes again. So just try it out. Let us know what the problems are. Keep communicating with us, and we'll try to make the V11 update as painless as possible.
Awesome. I want to show something that I think is a really interesting use of threshold walls that I like as well. It's all about controlling information reveal. One thing that's kind of a useful thing to do. So here's a map. I was just looking for a map that has some staircases. So here's a map that has some staircases in this dungeon. Suppose maybe this was a longer staircase or it's steep or something. When you're here on this landing of the staircase and you come around the corner, it's not great to be able to see up the stairs all the way to like what's in the far end of this room. That's not how the architecture would work. You'd be looking at a staircase in front of you and, you know, you wouldn't be able to see what's all the way down this hallway where there's maybe like a boss monster or something that you're going to have to fight. One cool thing you can do with threshold walls is, let's say we make a ethereal wall. Ethereal it doesn't block movement. You can move straight through it. I'll just make an ethereal wall and put it like halfway up the staircase, maybe like here. If I make it a threshold wall, and you know each of these is like 5 feet, so maybe I want a threshold of like 10 feet, I can say we're gonna restrict light and sight with proximity of 10 feet, but we're not going to restrict movement at all. So unlike a window, which would normally have like movement restriction normal, you can't just walk through it, we'll put movement restriction none in this case. So with this threshold wall at the halfway point of the staircase, what happens is I'm on this landing and this is just Fog of War that's explored. I'll reset fog so you see what's actually visible. I'm on this landing and I can see now that the stairs go up, but I can't see what's at the top of the stairs yet because I'm not on the stairs. Because it's a threshold, I'll move towards the threshold wall, and now when I'm on the staircase, suddenly then I can see like what's beyond it. So you don't get to sort of pre-plan your boss fight when you're down here on the landing because you don't know what's up there yet. And you can calibrate the proximity of the threshold. Maybe I only want it to be 5 feet. I want you to have to be a little further up the staircase before you get that sight reveal into the next room. So having those little threshold walls as ways to kind of govern like when you learn the next bit of information is pretty cool. Same theory for looking over the edge of a cliff, exactly. If you're not at the edge of the cliff, you can't see what's down below. But if you get to the edge of the cliff, you suddenly can see what's down below. And yes, it does work with one-way walls as well. You can combine one-way walls and thresholds together. So it's more than just windows. We're advertising this feature as windows because that's kind of what people sort of intuitively makes sense, but this feature is useful for a lot more than windows. It's useful in any situation where you don't want the party to be able to see something until they're close to it. All right. Shall we move on? Tabletop Anthologies asks, can you change the threshold distance at which you can see through it? Yes, absolutely. So that's what the little numeric field to the right of proximity is this changes the threshold, is how close do you have to be before you get that. Zeal asks, can we invert the threshold so you can't see things that are near to the wall unless you're close to it, but you can see things further away? Not currently. Not currently. We might, if this is a popular feature and if there is demand for like the inverse of this, we could perhaps add a vision mode that's instead of like proximity, it's called like distance or something. And basically it's the inverse where you would have to be further away than some threshold in order to be able to see through. I don't know exactly what the use cases for that are, but I guess that would be like being at the bottom of a cliff or something. I don't know. I think proximity is to me a little bit more useful, but we could perhaps add the inverse at some point. All right, let's talk about a next feature. So we did a sort of technical infrastructure feature, and then we did something shiny. Let's go back to doing a sort of technical infrastructure feature. One of the big things that we did in this update is a considerable expansion of support for document types and subtypes. So Kim was kind of the champion of this feature, and so Kim, why don't I get you to talk folks through what you worked on and what it allows developers to do.
Well, yeah, actually, there is a draft document. I don't know if that's worth bringing up. I can link you to it actually for the documentation for this. But essentially, if you've used Foundry, you know that when you create an actor, for example, you have several different types of actors you can choose from, usually defined by the system, but certain things like journal entry pages, for example, are defined, have like core software definitions. And yeah, so usually those where is our chat that I can
Do you
link
recall
into?
the
Here it
article
is.
slug?
Yeah, I'm just getting it for you now. There you go. Yeah, so usually those are defined by the system, and modules have no real way to interact with it. Normally, what modules have to do if they want to implement their own sort of, like if you take an actor, for example, or maybe an item is easier. If you wanted to implement a new type of item, like an enchantment item or something, the actors could equip. The best way that modules had to do that previously was to co-opt an existing system-defined type and add some flags to it, or co-opt an existing system-defined type and create a new sheet that can be used to sort of configure the flags. But now the functionality that systems have to define these types is now available to modules as well. So you can create your entirely new type. You can have then users who then activate your module will be able to see that type in the list of drop downs. They'll be able to create the type. All of the data that's normally stored related to that type is now under the control of the module as well. So it's really, I mean, it's a pretty significant extension to the API. There's like an incredible amount of customization which you can do now with modules. But I would caution some restraint, because with great power comes great responsibility. In this case, if a user disables your module, all of those items that your module provides will go. They'll disappear from their world. We have some tools for identifying better which items are missing now, so you don't get a huge shock when all your items go away, and it should warn you appropriately that things are going away. And we plan to improve that even more in V11. But for this prototype, the module subtype system is fully there and functional and usable.
Yeah, you've got a great example in this article of like how a module could define a quest as like a journal page type, and then you could add a data model for what data you want to store about the quest. You can use that data model as part of the type specific data for the quest page. This gives you schema, it gives you validation, it gives you data preparation, it gives you tools to automatically migrate your data from like older values to newer values if you need to do a migration to continue supporting compatibility. And so, that couples really nicely with the ability to register, say, like custom sheets for a certain type. So you can have a quest sheet for your quest type, and you've provided a whole expanse of comprehensive sort of end-to-end support for a logical concept within Foundry VTT that has a richly defined data model. It has a UI layer. It's really powerful stuff that you can do with this.
Yeah, exactly. It's
One clarification for Ripper, who asked about, is document deletion when you disable the module going to be addressed? So the documents don't get deleted, but because the type of the document is no longer understood or recognized, that document becomes invalid. We don't delete it, and so it can be recovered if you re-enable the module, or it can be recovered if you run a repair operation and say, well, I had this quest module, but I'm not using it anymore, so I'm just going to repair my quests to like make them just regular pages again. So they temporarily are suppressed as invalid documents unless they get repaired or unless that module gets re-enabled. It's not a situation where they get deleted. There's no irrecoverable data loss. In fact, one thing that would be great to show is some of the work that you've done, not specific to this system, but specific to the improvements to the support report with invalid documents in general, Kim. One thing I can do, I was trying to think of a good way to demo this. I'm going to go to like one of my old worlds that almost definitely is like not supported. I'm just going to set it back to some old data. So this is like a world from a campaign I was running a couple years ago. So the vintage of this data is probably like V6 or V7 or something. So this Sword Coast Adventures world, what a thrilling name, is going to get migrated. Yeah, from 071 was the last time that I used this world. So it's been a while on this one. So there's definitely going to be something that probably isn't totally right, but I'm gonna launch it. We're gonna see what happens. So we've launched the world. I think my background image is missing, but that's fine. Okay, so I've launched the world. It's migrated all my stuff. As I showed earlier, the data, previously all these NEDB files now are migrated to the LevelDB databases. So I've got all my stuff that's migrated through, all my content is here, but it's possible that some of my content was invalid or incompatible because it's like so old and it wasn't able to migrate properly. So what we have now is on the settings sidebar, we have support. Oh goodness, there is no issues. I almost thought for sure some of my data would not make it.
It's too good, yeah.
Too good. I mean, there's definitely like all my images are missing. I moved all my images around, so none of my images work. But I expected some documents to fail here, so I've been let down on my ability to demo this. Let me try. Maybe there's a different world I could do. Anyways, yeah, that migration was a little bit too effective. It didn't succeed in having some invalid documents. What else could I show? I don't know that I have a world where like I know for sure there's going to be invalid data. So I'm not sure how best to demo this, but let me instead just sort of provide some intuition. Or Kim, can you think of a good way to force an invalid document to be created? Because I mean, we're prevented from creating an invalid document, but
yeah, there's not a lot of good ways, save editing the database files,
which I can no longer do.
Which you can no longer do. The best way to do it is to actually have a module with that provides some subtypes and then disable the module.
I don't have that set up. I was delinquent in setting up the things that I would need for a convincing demo there. Oh well, anyways, I'll just kind of wing it and say what would happen. There's a new tab on the support and this support form is now support and issues. There's multiple tabs. It will report a variety of issues that may be present in your world, like invalid documents. There's a very nice UI that expands out and it shows you like exactly what's wrong with your invalid documents. Any client issues, like your browser is too old or your resolution's too low, those would show up here. Module issues are like modules you have active that have some compatibility issues potentially. Those will show up here so that you can, understand those. So yeah, really great like way to deliver that information. And so as Kim said, like if you had module provided document types and then that module got disabled, any documents that were relying on that type would show up in that list of invalid documents, so you could see what's wrong with them, and then you'd be able to make a choice about, whether to repair them and discard the module specific data, or whether you want to reactivate the module that was providing those. I can also show a little example of just what this...
There was a question on that actually, sorry. Yeah, about what happens to the documents if you disable the module. They stay there. They're just invalid. And if you re-enable the module, they'll come back.
Here's an example of like a sort of game system work in progress that's using models, specific explicit data models for like all of the different item types that exist in the system, and then using the API to register the data models so that you get like rich schema and migration and validation and things like that, in addition to specialized sheets. So this kind of approach of like define the data model, define the schema, attach that data model to your item type or your actor type or whatnot, and then provide sheets for that type. That's kind of the multi-pronged approach that we are advocating strongly as the kind of go forward software design for Foundry VTT. And this may eventually, although it's not something we're doing now, it may eventually allow us to do things like get rid of the like template JSON file, or do some other things that can maybe streamline to an extent, or standardize or modernize the way that some of that development is done. All right, let's move on to another cool feature. Persistent storage for packages. I'm not going to demo this because I think it's something that I can just say and it will make sense. Packages now have the ability to request a persistent storage location which survives package updates. So for example, if packages have some internal data that they like download and store, they can store that data in this storage location, and then that stored data will survive package updates. Usually on a package update, like everything's wiped out and the new version is replaces it. That storage folder will survive that process, so you can like store package specific data in a place that is still tied to the package that owns it, but is persisted across updates. This idea came out of some brainstorming that I was doing with JDW for Dice So Nice, and like maybe different. I'm not going to force JDW to follow through on this. It's totally up to him if he wants to use this feature or not. But part of this came out as like maybe a way to sort of store like DSN skins like within the DSN module, rather than needing to have lots of different modules for each different dice skin or something like that. But there's other use cases, of course, that would be good to use this feature for. There's also some improvements to declaring relationships between modules. You can provide a reason for relationships, like why a module requires another one, or why a module recommends another one. You can also list recommended relationships. So if there's a module, like two modules that if you have module B, then module A will do some extra cool thing, but module B isn't required. Module B can now be listed as a recommended relationship rather than a required relationship. So yeah, that's another neat little feature. We talked about Windows, we talked about Electron. The other sort of big ticket item that we focused on a lot in Prototype 1 was fog of war optimization. So the performance of fog exploration now, this is a pretty big map that I'm running right here. It's not enormous, but it's pretty big. So 12,000 pixels by 70 by 7,000 pixels. So it's a large map. Large, I would say this is a large map. Quite a few walls, not a ton, but anyways, yeah, pretty high degree of complexity on this map. What you'll notice, I'm sure, and I'm sorry about this, but what I'm sure you all live with a little bit on V10 is the occasional stutter, the sort of hitching when Fog of War is saved to the database. Well, that's gone. That's completely gone. There's no more hitching. Fog of War is just fast and smooth and seamless. There's no stuttering at all. The Fog of War persistence and performance and saving, it's been super optimized due to some really phenomenal work from Secret Fire. And there's just none of that like little occasional delay that you get when moving around where there's like a noticeable pause where you get that little hitch for Fog of War. So it's just incredibly seamless now. The performance, I mean, you see at the bottom right, I have a very good PC, but I'm just like sitting perpetually at 120 frames per second. There's no frame rate drop. There's no nothing. It's just the performance is like completely silky smooth. So yeah, so it's good times. Really good times to get rid of that Fog of War exploration stutter. And Secret Fire has done some really great work on that. I also feel the need to give a shout out to dev numbers. So we call them dev numbers because I never know which the numbers are, but there's, who I'm talking about, dev numbers, who provided some really great advice in how we could accomplish some of these performance improvements as well. Speaking of fog improvements, although not related to Fog of War, there is another fog improvement I can share. We added a weather effect for fog. So here I'll reload this and you see we've got this cool sort of mysterious fog, moving fog all over the map. So we have a nice new weather effect in Core that you can use. I haven't, of course, suppressed the weather from the interior parts of this dungeon, but yeah, it's a great looking fog weather effect that works really well on a number of maps and kind of makes the overall environment have a nice degree of immersion to it. Yeah, it's one I really like. Let's see if we got some questions I can answer.
Got so many questions.
Trying
to copy them all down. There's one for our KB folks, I guess. The hosting a dedicated server section in the installation guide on the website be updated with a Node.js update example. I don't actually know. I feel like we already had that, but maybe not. I don't know if Roman or Nath are in the chat. They can answer that one. This one was about create the CLI tooling to unpack compendium packs. Will it be possible? Oh, actually, you answered this one already. I should delete it. That was about whether it'd be usable without Foundry instance.
Don't delete people's questions, Kim.
From my document, not from the chat.
You have been deleted.
Have we received table support for the new text editor in V10? Have we? No. Will we? Yes, eventually. I think it's there.
Is that one tracked on our V11 nice to have or V11?
I don't know if it's in any of the V11 milestones. I
know that the lack of table support in the text editor is one of the remaining kind of pain points that people are facing. So I think there's a pretty good chance we'll be able to take care of that. I don't think we'll focus on it in the prototyping phase because during prototyping we want to really sort of stick to working on some of the like underlying technical investments. But I think by the time we get to the later phases of V11, I think there's a good chance we'll be able to do that.
Be clear, tables do exist. You can insert tables in Prosemary. You can copy and paste them. You can edit the source directly. There's just no GUI table editor, and honestly, a GUI table editor is quite difficult. And I've not used many that are actually good. I've used them and they're passable. They're all basically passable. So I don't know. I don't know how good our version will be. Maybe there's a plugin that will that will help us out here. But
Yeah, ideally there might be a Prosmira plugin that we can use that gives us some of that UI UX for free. It's not simple to make. I agree with you. Um, Thanks for the
uh,
sub, Gear Draxon. We appreciate that. Um,
so many questions. I've missed one. There was one that Jensen Vars mentioned earlier about not liking the separate edit and read windows. Um, I don't think there are any plans to change that. I think it is possible to do editing within the journal entry, but it's not without some work. Like the way that it's coded currently means that that's a little bit tricky. So no current plans to change that, though it could be tackled by a module. If it's a sheet, then a module can create its own sheet and maybe do something better.
let's go. While we wait for some more questions to come in, let's go through the rest of the patch notes because there's a number of like little features. We've kind of hit the highlights, but there's a bunch of little features that are also really really important and really good in V11. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through here and see what else jumps out. A couple of breaking changes. I'll just comment on these for the developers who kind of know what to expect. In general, we are working very hard for V11 to be a non-disruptive generational update where we can't guarantee zero breaking changes, but we are really working hard to have that be a small impact and to really preserve as much compatibility as we can through the process of making these improvements. So there's not a long list here of breaking changes, and in fact, one of the things the team has been testing is going through a bunch of game systems and seeing how they're working even on prototype 1. And a lot of the game systems that we've tried are ones that are are working without issue, without any issue at all, just going straight into V11 prototype 1. There's a couple of game systems that do have one or two things that have changed on them, but the list of things that need addressing here is pretty small. One of them is that we have some changes that were made in prior versions where we're reached the end of a deprecation period. So we've provided like graceful deprecation support for some things over V9 and V10, and now that we're into V11, it goes away. So there's some breaking changes because of that. There's some change to the initial value of string fields, which actually was a little bit more fiddly than I expected it to be, but I think I stand behind this as the right call to make. With string fields, like what the initial value of the string field is now a little bit more adaptive to the parameters. So for example, like a required false string field, optional string field, the initial's undefined. A required true blank true, initials blank. Required true blank false, nullable true, the initial is null. So essentially, like choosing which initial value kind of best fits the parameterization of the string field. I think I stand behind this because I think it's a pretty sensible change to make, but it did have a couple of impacts in terms of string fields in our data models not quite working the way that we had relied on before in a couple of cases. Another thing that's worth calling out is there's been some cleanup for hexagonal grid manipulation methods. This is all detailed in the Git issue attached to this patch note. This, I don't expect it to really affect people too much, but there are a couple of little changes as a result of cleaning up some of the hex grid methods. Another thing worth calling out is that can drag drop should now be checked before binding drop listeners in the application class. It's a little bit of a specialized thing, but just a sort of order of operations thing in terms of attaching those listeners to different application objects. Another one that this is, for example, we tested a number of systems and many didn't have any issues, but one or two did. I think this is probably an issue that is responsible for one of the systems that did have some problems. We moved the setup hook. The setup hook was in a particularly frustrating location because it didn't allow you to interact with document data, but before all of the UI was generated. So I want to show the main game initialization flow. This is not going to be like a big problem for anyone who uses the setup hook or anything. Most people who use the setup hook and will continue to use the setup hook, it's going to just continue to be perfectly fine. But depending on exactly what you're doing inside that hook, there was a slight order of operations change here. So the advantage of the new setup hook location is that it happens after all of the documents in the world are available. So you can use the setup hook to make changes which depend on the world data and the documents in the world. And it allows you to do things with those documents before those documents get used for things like rendering UI or rendering the canvas or something like that. So it's a better place for the setup hook to be. I think it will impact some people, but I think overall it's a very positive change. We also have, on the topic of hooks, this is not a breaking change, but there is a localization init hook, which is really well positioned to do any upfront localization actions that you need to do. I know in many game systems, there's like a workflow where you do like one-time localization at the beginning of certain like configuration strings or something like that. That's something that a lot of systems are doing that. This hook is a very great and useful specific place to do that kind of one-time localization because it happens immediately after the default localization setup happens. We also made improvements to our WebWorker framework to have some new features and to support dynamic script imports as well as transferable objects. Transferable objects is a really powerful tool for kind of advanced calculation using web workers because you can have a buffer, an array buffer, that array buffer can be transferred to the worker without copying the data. So you're actually transferring reference to the object in memory directly to the worker without needing to copy the data. And it overcomes one of the biggest hurdles, the biggest bottlenecks with web workers, which is actually data transfer, is what often slows down the effectiveness of web workers. And so using transferable objects where you can is a huge performance gain. So we made some improvements in our worker management framework to support transferable objects. Let me pause for a quick question.
Shared memory. It doesn't go, like, you can't mutate it in the worker, and it appears in the main world, or you can.
Basically, when you transfer the object to the worker, a reference to it still exists in the main thread, but you can't do anything with it. It sort of becomes locked, and like ownership of that object is transferred to the worker, and then it can be transferred back.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope I'm right, and I think I've answered that correctly, but someone can check me if I'm not actually right. Question: can we restrict weather from part of the map? Not yet, except in the case where you have a roof. If you have a roof, weather is restricted where there is that roof. So, for example, on this cabin map, if you have a roof over the cabin, like there's no like falling snow inside the cabin under the roof, but that does require a roof at the moment. We have definite plans to support weather region masking in the core software at some point. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but absolutely at some point we will support the ability to mask certain weather regions. I don't know when. What were the changes to data models being made in V11? Something about a V10 mode. I'm not sure.
The enable V10 validation, probably.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. Do you want to give a quick summary of that, Kim?
Uh, yeah, I guess. Well, we found a bug in V10 where um, data models were not being validated correctly. And we couldn't really just fix that bug because that would mean that
Yeah.
anyone who already had data models implemented, suddenly a bunch of stuff would be invalid and they didn't realize, and people's worlds would break. So we have a special flag which kind of turns on that correct validation behavior, so you can opt into it if you knew you weren't going to be affected, or if you can do the migration correctly. But it really is a bug that is just that is now fixed. So in V11 that flag's gone, um, but I don't expect it to be a problem. I haven't had any issues with it in the D&D 5e system as well. When we were implementing data models, it didn't seem to cause issues, but it's worth checking. I think the actual usage of data models is fairly low currently in
Mm-hmm.
systems, so it's unlikely to be a problem.
Yeah. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit just to make sure to stay relatively current with chat. Love the Rip levels mod by Ripper. There's a core function issue that can be annoying for DM. You can see every token placed regardless of the level it's on. So I won't comment on the functionality of the module, but I will say that you should know that the desire to provide multi-level experience is something that I care intensely about personally. The only reason we haven't done it yet is because prioritization is hard and we can only choose to work on some things at a time, and we don't want our updates to be too long or too big. But if I could, like cancel everything that we're doing or that we need to do, and I could just be free to work on one feature for Foundry VTT, it would either be levels or event triggers. I mean, those are two that I just care deeply about, and I just haven't really been able to do them yet because prioritization is hard. So I think it's definite that at some point we will really take that problem on and work on it, but it won't be in V11. Beyond that, I don't know.
The one question which Ilyasa has kept at the top, which is about the. Oh, I'll just read it verbatim. On the topic of missing images, any plans on implementing asset retrieval for token art, etc., using something like UUID/hash instead of file path? Hosting several games and moving files around breaks all games referencing that file path. So it should be possible. I mean, depending on how you're hosting your games, for example, it should be possible to reference like your data directory directly, and then those references shouldn't break. But alternatively, there's another thing which is, I guess it's not really in V11. It's not, but this idea of dynamic art. we've implemented in the 5e system and has also implemented, well, we got the idea from the PF2e system. It's also in 13th Age, I think, and that allows modules to dynamically attach art to tokens or actors in compendia. So it would be possible for example, have a module which you install in each of your worlds, which attaches that art in a totally dynamic way, and that would also be portable.
Yeah, it's a tough problem, but there are some different techniques that can be used now, and then there's also always the possibility that we can add additional features to support improvements there in the future. Continuing to go down the patch note list, just kind of hit some highlights. Scene resizing has been improved. So there's on the scene configuration now, there's like a, link aspect ratio, so that if you're resizing your scene, it'll like auto adjust the other. And then it's also the case, I'm gonna duplicate this scene before doing this, just in case it fails on me, or I want to actually keep it at the original dimensions, but I'll edit the duplicate of my scene, and I'm going to just like downsize it by half. There's a new feature that when you make that change, it will automatically reposition all of the objects in the scene. So you notice that all of my walls are still in the same, like in the correct place relative to the downsized scene. All of the tokens, their positions have been shifted so that they're still in the correct place when resizing the scene. Cody did great work on this to get this feature implemented. Another highlight to hit is that let's see, rollable tables have been improved. Some other good work that Cody has done this update. So the table header is now a little bit easier to read, and it's sticky so that it will, like when you scroll the table, it used to be the header was sort of part of what would scroll. So now the header for the table is sticky. The description of the rollable table also uses the rich text editor now instead of like a sort of rudimentary HTML field. Also, on a similar vein, Active Effects now provide an HTML editor for a description. So Active Effects didn't have a description previously, but now like this like shield active effect, you can give like a text description to each active effect to keep track of, what it's from or what it does. So that's another new feature. There's a new close all doors button that is pretty convenient. So suppose I'm like prepping a scene like this, and I've got doors all over the map. This map has a ton of doors, and I've just been like testing and prepping, and now it's time to run my session, and I'm like, oh god, all these doors are open. On the walls layer, there's a close all doors button that will close all doors if you click it, and so that's pretty helpful. Let's see, the wall, you've noticed the new wall icon. We improved the visibility of the one-way wall directional icon. It's now easier to read a bit because it's like over top of the wall, where previously it was kind of like underlapping in an awkward way, and therefore it was kind of hard to read. Let's see, rollable tables, you can now roll them from the sidebar instead of opening the table if you want. Like if I want to roll on this potion cache, I can write in the context menu for the table, I can roll it right from the sidebar without needing to open the table. Let's see. These are pretty minor. We improved some of the layout and UI UX on the volume controls. There's new tooltips that tell you like exactly like the numeric value of your volume slider, in addition to just sort of visually eyeballing it. There's also tooltips that explain what each layer of the volume controls do. So that's helpful. Also, fixing the volume like layout a little bit to address some kind of UI wonkiness there. Um, let's see. I talked about the improved support and issues tab. That was a big addition. Added a missing indicator to the adventure builder. So, for example, if I think I have an example here of like an adventure document that, like here is an example of a document, an actor that was added to the adventure, but that it no longer exists in the world. So this was previously something that wasn't notified to you, that this was a problem, and so now this is highlighted as a particular problem. Like if you're going to rebuild the adventure, but some of the content is missing unexpectedly, that gets called out now. Let's see. Oh, here's a really great one. A lot of these like sort of miscellaneous grab bag of stuff. Cody did a lot of great work on these sort of quality of life improvements. Another one that Cody did is the chat log. I'm just going to spam the chat log with a bunch of messages real quick. And what happens when, let's create another, let's connect to this game so I can sort of show it side by side. The chat log, like if you're scrolled up in the chat log, there's now a jump to bottom that kind of like highlights at the bottom. And then also importantly, if other people are typing, so like I'm sending more messages here in the log, it doesn't auto jump the log if you're like scrolled up. Like if you were scrolled up in the log reading something and a new message comes in, it doesn't auto jump the log to the bottom anymore. It just sort of prompts you that new messages are there. It's an experience like more similar to like the way that Discord handles it when like messages come in the channel, but you're sort of scrolled further back up in the chat history. You can just click to jump to the bottom. It's a really great little improvement for everybody. Let's see. For combat tracker alerts, we've moved the configuration of that into the combat tracker settings UI, so it's at the same place that you choose like the tracked resource and whether to skip defeated combatants and stuff. We've also added a little button so you can preview. You can preview what the...
It is your turn. It will be your turn
different
next.
Sound sets sound like
you are
before
next.
choosing. So that's good. Good stuff. Let's see. Game canvas. We talked about Windows. We talked about some point source improvements. We didn't. That's kind of a little low level. We talked about Fog of War. We talked about the fog weather effect shader. All good stuff. We've covered this. We've covered all of these. I think that's all good. We did have some improvements to the tags displayed for packages on the setup page. So these tags about compatibility have been improved upon and clarified. I also want to let people know to expect that we are going to be doing some big things on the setup page later in V11. That's something that we've internally committed to doing. So expect some really exciting sort of setup page work to come in a later V11 update. Location and localization accessibility, we refactored our mouse event handlers to replace them with more general and sort of future-proofed pointer events, which expands support for both mouse as well as pointer gestures. So pointer being like a sort of stylus with a touchpad, or also certain touch events can be emulated using pointer events. And so switching our event handlers from specifically mouse events to pointer events is a small step in the direction towards better touch support and things like that. Let's see. Let's take a couple questions. What can I pause and see what people are talking about?
There was one about making combat sounds configurable. I think we just didn't
quite make it. It will be coming in prototype 2.
Okay.
The idea is
Did make-
there. It's a good idea, but there's still a little bit of work that just didn't quite make the cut on P1.
There was one as well about for rollable tables. This wasn't a question, even though it was prefixed with question. It would be nice to trigger sub-rollable tables automatically as an option. No question mark. But I thought they already did that.
Yes, that is in fact already supported. So what you can do is, I'm just going to see if I have an example. If not, I'll make one. I'll just say like parent table. We'll add some results to the parent table, and we will call some other roll tables. I can just drag and drop them as well. So we'll have like exciting places and magic items and encounters and the potion cache. And depending on the result that is rolled, like when you roll on the parent table, it will roll on the child table. Now I think my child table here is a little bit broken on this one, so that's why it ended up being like null. But let's see. Yeah, here I get like a magic item on the... So first I rolled like a 2 on the parent table, and then it rolled on the child magic items table. So you can nest rollable tables, and you can put different weights on the tables. Like if I wanted exciting places to be, much more heavily weighted, I could give it a higher weight than magic items. And so you can control the probabilities of each result in the table. And then when you roll on the parent table, it'll roll in the child. So yeah, already supported. Good question, though. Never hurts to ask, and I'm always happy to be able to give a satisfying answer.
LevelDB stores data and compresses it. Does that mean we get lemon juice in the database? Thank you for repeating that question so we didn't miss it. Blue sky, black bird.
Important questions, I guess. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. Do we get lemon juice?
Well, if you get lemon juice in your computer hardware, you should go to a repair shop immediately.
Yeah.
That breaks Foundry.
Among several migration. API changes, there's just a family of API changes I want to highlight. We have a bunch of new utility methods for geometry classes like circle, polygon, and rectangle. Those can be helpful for anyone who's doing geometric manipulation. I mentioned Kwok's involvement in developing the window feature. Another thing that I worked with Kwok on, and he was a champion for in V11, is an improved performance algorithm for doing polygon circle and polygon rectangle unionization or intersection. I know people's eyes are going to glaze over when I start talking about this, but it's pretty cool stuff. So one of the things that we have to do very frequently in order to have like the buttery smooth fog of war and vision, dynamic vision and everything is we have to do some complex geometric calculations to compute polygons, and especially when like your radius of vision is limited or it's a light source that has a limited radius, we have to intersect that polygon with a circle or sometimes intersect it with a rectangle. And there's a particular algorithm called Euler-Atherton, which is some pretty fancy and smart math. And the implementation, we've implemented that algorithm in Foundry to specifically use that algorithm for the purpose of intersecting polygons with circles. And because that's such an important part of what we do, because we compute a lot of polygons and we very frequently intersect those polygons with circles, it's a big performance win for the software, and it's part of what keeps us sitting at max frame rate with no dips when we're running around a big map. That combined with the work that Secret Fire did on Fog of War, the efficiency of Fog of War extraction, that's a real strong 1-2 punch that makes our lighting engine even more powerful and high performance in V11 than it is in V10.
Really impressive. It's really, really impressive stuff.
Let's see, what else? I think I think that's basically it. I mean, we have a couple of bug fixes, but really we're not focused on fixing bugs in v11p1. We're focused on making brand new bugs. Isn't that right?
Yeah, we made a few. We were furiously fixing them before this prototype release. We had definitely a lot of new bugs.
I think obviously it is a prototype release. It's not going to be stable. It's not supposed to be stable. But I do think it's in pretty good shape. I think it's pretty good for a prototype release. I think I'm finding it to be pretty usable. I'm not, we've tried, like I said, we've tried a bunch of different systems, and it's looking pretty good. There are some systems that have some issue. Usually it's like a very small thing, like it's due to the fact that we moved the setup hook or something like that. It's going to be just like a very small adjustment, but yeah, I think I'm happy with where it is, and one of the sort of call to arms that we'll be putting out to our developer community when Prototype 1 goes out is to, please, if you can spare a little bit of time, help us test this, help us understand how it's working for you and for your module or modules or system. Help us help you. The big goal would be, not to force you to have to go off and start doing work, but the goal is for you to let us know what's working, what's not, ultimately so that we can help you, so that we can fix things. Like we were doing some testing earlier this afternoon. We saw that, we were testing Pathfinder 2e, and we saw, there's an issue with the way that Pathfinder 2e handles hearing sources, because they do some extra fancy logic around like whether you're able to hear certain nearby things. And we noticed that broke because of something that we changed. And, as part of that testing, we were able to track it back and make a change on our end that made it to where that was no longer breaking. And that's ultimately the goal, is that where we can, we want to make our code better so that the developers in the community don't have to do as much. And so, what we encourage all of the developers to do is don't rush out and try and fix things immediately. Just help share information with us so that we can fix things and we can make things better. And if it's something that is intentionally a breaking change and we really mean it, and it is the thing that we need to do to move forward, we can then confirm for you, like, yes, this is something that we had to change. Here's why. Here's what you need to adjust to move forward. So really, communication is key, I think, and I just urge folks to engage with us, because more communication during the prototype and development phases of V11 will result in a much more stable V11 release, and I think that's something that everybody wants to see. I think that's about it for me. I'm happy to take a few more questions. Anyone else in chat wants to throw some questions our way, really happy to show some stuff or answer some questions. Otherwise, I think we're about done.
There was one question about isometric grid. So I just wanted to quickly say that as you have your favorites, just your favorite features, like event triggers and levels, I know that isometric is Ludovic's favorite, and I think it's close to one of mine as well.
Yeah.
So will it ever happen? Probably.
I think probably.
But not in V11. And maybe not for some time. There is a module, I believe it works in V10. I don't know if, I'm not sure yet, but there is a module that has isometric support. I know the developer did post some bugs related to their work getting on V10, but I didn't check if it had actually had a V10 release yet. I've got other questions for you.
Question from Revelo Waldo about, can the thresholds on, I presume on threshold walls, be tied to the scene brightness or lights? For example, at night, looking through a window in a lit room is far easier. No, although I see what you're saying. Like, the differential luminosity of the window makes a big difference in terms of whether you can see in or see out. I agree. That is realistic. That's not something that the system supports. I won't say never. Who knows? Maybe we keep doing cool stuff. We might do that someday, but not something that we're looking at. Can you integrate enhanced terrain into Core? I have to confess my lack of familiarity with enhanced terrain. It's probably an excellent module. It's not one that I've used personally. Let's look it up. Let's promote the author of enhanced terrain. Enhanced Terrain Layer by Iron Monk. Makes a lot of great modules, that Iron Monk. Adds a terrain layer that can be used to calculate difficult terrain. Got it. Okay, so you can denote that certain areas of the map are difficult terrain and that automates in with certain things. Yeah, cool. Seems awesome. Yeah, I'd love to do something like this someday, definitely. I think the question was, can we? Yes, we could. We could do it. Will we, or when will we? I don't know. But yeah, nice. I like that. I like that module.
So there was a question a little while back about databases, the atomicity of writes. I can read it. Are you using checksums or checksums? I guess, I don't know. Maybe it's an author level transactions or something else to provide atomic operations across sub-level writes and parent level metadata updates. If not, how are you ensuring atomicity that existed with full doc writes previously? Or does the new system not ensure that, meaning that module implementers have to be ready to handle the scenario in their own error handling where a sub-level was written but the parent level not, or vice versa? Certainly wouldn't have to handle it yourself. But
I think I've got a reasonable answer to this, although it's not a completely nailed on, unequivocal answer. So LevelDB at the underlying technology has some built-in functionality to have atomic writes. In particular, what we do to make sure to take best advantage of that is we use their batch operations. So whenever we have to touch multiple sublevels, like sibling sublevels, like we need to update an item and an active effect and the actor itself all at once, we do that as 3 write operations to each of those sublevels, but as part of a batched operation on the overall database. So that whole set of transactions is a single batched write operation, and that batched write operation is atomic in terms of the way that it's executed and managed with respect to other operations that are submitted to the database. So it has its own internal queue, and it's going to execute those transactions in like a FIFO order. And so if you're on the client and you send like 10 different requests to the server, assuming that the network time means that those 10 requests arrive in the same order, that's the order that they'll get performed in on the server side, each with an atomic write operation. Now, there could be some potential weirdness or race conditions that can occur. I certainly when network transit time is involved, it becomes non-guaranteed. But I think the atomicity of the database operations has looked really good to me in the testing that I've done. We did actually remove a extra semaphore layer that we were using to try and guarantee some of that. It was an extra layer that we had to use previously with NEDB, and we were able to remove that and just kind of allow LevelDB to do its thing. Now, we're going to monitor the situation and see if we notice any issues. And if we notice issues, and if there's a need to, we can restore a semaphore at like a earlier point in the server-side workflow that sort of forces a little bit more control over that. I don't think we need it, and by eliminating it, we get a little bit better performance, as well as reduced complexity of our code. So hopefully, like I said, it's not a nailed on answer, but hopefully that's an answer that's trending in the right direction for you.
There's any plans to have a UI that would allow character sheets to be used from a tablet or phone? I would say plans, yes. Not in V11 though. I don't know if we had an option for the poll for this specifically. We might have had better touch support on there, maybe as the poll, but it didn't win.
Yeah. Ripper question, for Windows, is the distance center to center, or do we draw a perpendicular line? We draw a perpendicular line from the observer to the closest point on the wall segment, and that's what's used to compute distance. So it's pretty good. It's pretty faithful.
Non-async roles.
We have to talk about this internally.
Yep.
It came up earlier today, and we were like, let's just delay that until prototype 2.
Yes.
We need to have a discussion about it internally. There's a weird sort of dependency nest where we were going to get rid of it in V11, but the text editor enrich HTML method uses synchronous roles to handle support for inline roles enriched in the text editor. There's a little bit of a chain of dependencies here, and so we need to talk about it. Probably I should wait until we've had that conversation and to say an answer, but I do think I'll leave this out there at a high level. I do think there probably are use cases in the software where you want to evaluate a role synchronously and quickly using whatever random number generator is just present in JavaScript, whether it's like a custom Mersenne twister that our dice system uses, or whether it's just the math random function. There are times when, for various reasons, you want to evaluate a little bit of randomization, but there's no need to, say, prompt a human user to perform that role. And for those use cases, it could be useful for us to maintain some way to perform a quick synchronous role, but we do want the main dice roll API to be async, and we want the main pathway of when you roll dice, it's an async operation, and that allows for custom dice and custom dice terms to do whatever they want between the roll being requested and the results being returned. Question from D1 Axis. Would you please solve the use case of Westmarch style games that have 100 plus players that need to be able to access sheet editing all at times, but games need to run at a given time? Either a way to import-export the actor data from an external UI, or a way to break that apart from in-game chat. Tough question. I think there's a combination of things that can be done. There may be some features that already exist that you might not be familiar with, certainly for importing or exporting actors. But yeah, a game with 100 players, it's super cool, but it's not exactly like the bread and butter use case for the VTT, which is really focused on, a smaller group and the workflows around supporting a smaller group. That's not to say we can't or shouldn't try and better support game servers that have a really large number of players, but it's not something that we're exactly designing for. But I think don't despair from my answer. I think there's things we can do and will continue to do to try and make those sorts of experiences better. In terms of being able to like manage your actor, maybe while the server is running a different world, or while the server isn't running, it's a tough problem because of the way that Foundry's designed, and the fact that it is decentralized and self-hosted. It's like, you're not submitting your actor updates to us on a centralized server that we maintain. It's really up to whoever's hosting your game to control whether your server's running or not. But there are some things that could be done.
Very good question from FX, who is a system dev. How will module subtypes affect systems? Will systems have to add type checks, e.g. in actor prepare data to prevent initialization errors? Currently, yes. It's been the case that systems did not know about types that could be outside of their control, and now there are. There might be ways that we can make this better, but it's difficult to do so without introducing breaking changes that systems have to accommodate anyway. But currently, yeah, you'll see this with the D&D 5e system, for example. If you implement a new actor subtype, it throws errors in actor preparation. I think tentatively what needs to happen is that the onus is on module authors at the moment, that if they're adding subtypes to the system, they need to test that it works in the system, and it might be that their subtypes just don't work in their system, and they need to get in contact with the system developers to cooperate to get this working. But there might be some alternative ways forward. But we'll see from the feedback from prototype 1 what we could do there.
So a question from Inaluki about plans to allow disabling of certain system packs on a world level. For systems like PF2E with a ton of compendium packs, it'd be nice to be able to disable some of them that are of no use to the world. I think that's a nice shout, and a central theme of V11 is compendium improvements. Everything user experience related to compendium packs. So this is something that I know is on our backlog somewhere, and it's in the scope of consideration that we may be able to allow you to say like hide. Currently you can toggle visibility of a compendium pack, which means like, can your players see it or not? But we could perhaps add a way to completely like suppress a compendium pack altogether so that it doesn't even show up, and you don't even connect to it as a database file. It doesn't show up in your sidebar. It's just ignored. I think, I won't promise, but I think there's a clear use case for that, and it's something that we'll be looking at. A question from Torge 135. One thing to note is that in the configure settings menu, there is a setting called disable game canvas, and that setting to disable the game canvas is a individual player level setting. So here I've just disabled the game canvas. This is only affecting me right now as a player. Other players might still have the canvas, but I can still, open and use my character sheet. I can still make dice rolls. I can still take notes in the journal. I can do all the other stuff that I can do in Foundry VTT, but I have disabled the canvas. I have the canvas disabled just for me as a player. So yeah, so the good news for you is that feature does exist and can allow certain players to disable that. All right, I think we've reached the end of the questions, and this is a great time to start wrapping up the stream. Feel free to get a final round of questions in, but Kim, thank you very much for tagging along and staying up late and doing this stream with us. And I hope everyone has enjoyed seeing the really hard work that the team has been putting into Foundry V11. I really feel that on top of everything that V10 did and on top of everything V9 did, V11 is just every version is the best version yet, but this version is the best version yet. And so we're really looking forward to continuing work on V11 and getting it to everybody, and sharing next time that we go do a stream like this, sharing all the amazing work that we've done in Prototype 2, which will have a number of additional cool things to showcase, I'm sure. For those of you who missed a fair chunk of the stream, it will be available for re-watching on Twitch, basically right after we go offline, but also we'll get it uploaded to YouTube within the next couple days. As far as what the quick text summary would be, basically it's just going over our patch notes. So once we get V11 Prototype 1 out, the text summary of what we covered, I guess, would mostly be the highlights section of the patch notes. All right, awesome. Let's leave it there. Thank you all so much for joining us and for following along. It was great to get a chance to talk with you all. And to answer your questions. We're working really hard to keep making Foundry VTT the best system agnostic virtual tabletop that we possibly can. And it's great to see all of the support for all the different systems that are going on in our community. And, thank you all so much for the support. As I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, it's been a little bit of a wild start to 2023 so far, and our community has been really supportive and encouraging, and we've felt everyone behind us with things that have been going on in addition to us just working really hard on the software. And so while we didn't really want to make that a big focus of today's stream, I just want to say thank you to everyone for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been truly incredible.
All right, folks, we're going to go. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Chat with us on Discord, social media, Reddit, Twitter. We just created a Mastodon account. I don't know how much we're going to use it, but the team wanted to branch out a bit. You can find us there. Be among our first follows, maybe. I don't know. And we will see you around next time. Thanks very much. Cheers. Farewell.
Thanks.